So, today is Palm Sunday. We're also celebrating the spring equinox. And if you're with us here in the winter, I did a talk called Solstice of Sons. And we talked about the winter solstice and all the meanings and the out of the darkness into the light, which was more of about a spiritual birth, which is our entrance into this world. As we talk today, we're going to be talking about the spring equinox. We see the stories of all the magi's and mystics and how the cycle of the planet and the people in our own world mirrored the enlightenment of the human being. It mirrored society, it mirrored life. I'm going to do a little reading at the beginning and talk a little bit about the different heroes from the past and some of the meanings of the spring equinox, and then we'll discuss it a little bit. The spring equinox, also known as the vernal equinox, is a time in Earth's annual cycle around the sun in which day and night are equal in length, before the days finally start to get longer after the dominance of darkness during the winter, and life springs forth from death. Its deeper spiritual significance reveals the mysteries of spiritual resurrection. In Christianity, the spring equinox is the time of the Passion, Crucifixion, and Resurrection of Jesus. Likewise, in ancient Egypt, it is the time of the resurrection of the ancient Egyptian god Osiris, and the resurrection of the Mayan maize god Hunahpu. The great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt, symbol of resurrection, gazes precisely at the rising of the spring equinox sun. The temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia aligns to the spring equinox and depicts the scene of the churning of the Milky Ocean, the struggle between the forces of light and darkness. At the Temple of the Feathered Serpent in Mexico, Chichen Itza, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl ascends the 9 terraces of the pyramid on the spring equinox. Throughout the world, the spring equinox is a time of great confrontation between the forces of darkness and light. In the death and resurrection of the central deities of sacred teachings throughout the world, it symbolizes what an initiate goes through in a definitive and important stage of self-realization, where the struggles between darkness and light creates opposition needed to attain immortality. This is symbolized by the dark half of the year on one side of the spring equinox and the light half of the year on the other side of the spring equinox. Now, as we've all come into this community, a lot of people are familiar with astrology, and even if you're not familiar with astrology, you may be familiar with astronomy. And the fact that we are in a solar system, and for half of the year, we are descending into the darkness, and the other half of the year, we are ascending into the light. And all the magi's and mystics of days gone by have taught us these things. Their lives symbolize the entire cycle of our planet, the entire cycle of our being. And what they've been bringing us is a lesson of balance. As we continue, the spring equinox stands upon the point of balance, upon which everything pivots in its motion in the universe, in the cycles of the season and within ourselves. On one side of the equinox is the dark half of the year. On the other half is the light half, representing the struggle between those forces of death and decay, birth and life. It is the antithesis that gives motion to all cycles in the universe, and which is likewise found in the spiritual works to awaken. This is why Jesus, Osiris, Quetzalcoatl, etc., faced their greatest confrontations with darkness to attain the light at the spring equinox. This is also symbolic of the tug of war between the good and evil. The pulling back and forth between light and darkness symbolizes an underpinning universal principle in creation found in the cycles of cosmic time and human life. It reveals the role of darkness and light in light within ourselves and our lives. The same struggle between the forces of good and evil takes place within the world. Even though most people are completely unaware of it, in life, one is either taking part in this struggle or they simply are an unconscious victim to it. If one is in this struggle, they are either fighting for the light or fighting for the darkness. Those who do not do neither, who do not fight, who do not struggle against darkness or light, are simply as the creatures of the ocean's existence become churned to the pieces from the churning struggle that this produces. So as we move forward in this, we have most of us in our day and age have been brought up with a Christian belief system. And I invite us all to look into these other magi's and heroes from the past and realize how their lives symbolize, again, what life is and the own enlightenment in our world. They come to a place of understanding within themselves and facing their own darkness, facing their own light, and doing all the work that they needed to do for the people in their day and age. We're more familiar with Jesus because it's the day and age that were brought up in. But again, I invite us all to do some research and find out who Osiris was, who Mithras was, what did the ancient texts from the Mayan say. When we're looking at all these different things and we're walking in our lives, we sometimes may see and feel the darkness of society. Sometimes, and I'm going to go back for a minute, Jesus talked about sin in a place of ripe or unripe. Our minds in the Bible and some of the different books in the Bible has made sin about right and wrong. And the way he translated and taught us is just about ripe for the picking, ripe within yourself to receive these lessons. And some people just aren't ripe yet. Some people in our society are just not going to get it. They may walk this whole lifetime and just be part of that churning of the milky ocean that they talked about a moment ago, where they simply just don't understand and they're not in that struggle. And we may have met people in our lives like this, and it's never about judgment. We'll talk about judgment more in a minute. We've talked about judgment quite a bit in the last few weeks with Right Use of Will, Handbook to Higher Consciousness, raising our own consciousness and understanding the emotion-backed addictions and judgments we have that make us focus more on the darkness than the light. So as people are in society are still battling this, these people, Jesus, Osiris, Mithras, and etc., have come to bring us to an enlightenment to help us receive their messages through their stories and through their life. There's so many things that we will look at in this lifetime, like judgments, and we see each other judging people. We see ourselves, if we're willing to look inside and own the judgments that we may have with ourselves and with society. We see racism. We see prejudice against gay people or any kind of alternative lifestyle. We've seen the persecution of Jewish people throughout history and even in our day and age now. We've seen the inequality of women in our own country, much less beyond the boundaries of our country into some of the places where women just have no rights at all. These things represent that tug of war between the forces within us and without. The opportunity to face our own demons and to reconcile this. As we've all traveled this world, we've all seen the darkness of society. We've all been in a place where we have judged it, and we've all been in a place where we have wanted to bring into the light. Now, some of us have walked in this planet thinking, well, they should fill in the blank. But it's a personal journey. It's something I'm really starting to understand and learn in my own body, that we're all on a separate soul walk. And as we come together and gather, like attracts like minds, like hearts, like beings, like souls, we're going to come into a place on purpose to do these things and to bring out of our darkness the light. Well, there's work that needs to be done in that. Each of the masters faced this in their lives, and what they went through tells more of the story of the human condition and what we are transcending to awaken to. Sometimes we just have to breathe into this. When we did meditation this morning, I invited the folks that were here to look at the different things in their life, to look at the darknesses in their life, to look at the betrayals in their life, and ask their own higher guidance, higher wisdom, higher being to illuminate that, to see inside you which part of you was facing this? What demon in you? We looked at the story of Jesus, and we all hear the 40 days and 40 nights when he went into the desert and faced the devil. And all the devil did was try to tempt him. And what the devil was doing in these stories were trying to tempt him with worldly things. And Jesus knew better. He knew of this spirit world. He knew of the enlightened being within him that was awakening and facing the devil, facing his own demons, facing his own darkness, was an essential part of his own growth. And as the story goes, was an essential part of our own growth so that we can face these demons without demonizing them. So just breathe into that one for a moment. Because so many times we want to face the demons within us and make them wrong. And it's not about right or wrong. It's less about right or wrong than it is about dark and light, balance. The universe is always singing balance, and that is exactly what the spring equinox is about. It is the day when night and day are equal. And for us in the southern part of for those in the southern part of the hemisphere, that would be the autumn equinox for them. Tempted by the illusion of this world and knowing we may live in this world but are not of this world, when everything in our ego or the lie within us that would have us believe that we are of this world and limited to the confines of the physical. Those are some of the things that these masters went through. And again, we're more familiar with the story of Jesus because that's what we were brought up with. But all of them were saying the same thing. When they look at the planets and the stars and all of the different things that the Egyptians, the Mayans, they knew astronomically how to measure these things. They knew the cycles of the planets. They knew what was ascending and what was descending. They were gifted with this knowledge and tried to pass it on to the people. And a lot of other people didn't want us to know these things. We have so many different books within the Bible that have been mistranslated, things left out, things put in, because kings and emperors and leaders of the time didn't want the people to know and have their own salvation. They didn't want you to have your own personal enlightenment because then you would not follow them. If I want to control you, one of the biggest ways I'm going to do is with fear and lies. The truth will set you free. And that's what these men brought. They brought truth. They brought truth of the being of our body, the being of our planet. We are in a 3D world, and as much as we have seen all the different wonders of the universe, we've only got to experience it walking on Earth so far. You may astral project and all those wonderful things, but in your 3D world, you're hanging out on this planet. And this planet has undergone some serious things that have shed both darkness and light. As we all come together and look at the different things in our lives that we share with each other, we know how we can ripple the light. We're aware of our light side. We're aware of our heart side and how much we love. But are we willing to look into the darkness? All the demons that we must face, overcome, and transcend. And each of these cycles, as you look at the story and the passion, represents a cycle of betrayal, death, rebirth, and then resurrection. Well, what about betrayal? It's like it's one of the hardest things for us to ever have gone through in our lives. And that's one of the things I invited us to look at in our own meditation today, is what forms of betrayal have you experienced in your life? From childhood, to jobs, to school, friends, mates, cousins, doesn't matter. We have to look at this. Now, the deepest part of this one is, can we look at this and be grateful for it? Becky was leading into that in the prayer. Can we be grateful for the different things that happen in our lives that may not be so happy? But to be betrayed within ourselves is one of the hardest things for a human being to go through. And yet Jesus personified this as he kissed Judas, as the story goes, because he knew that Judas had to play his part for him to pass his message and for all of those things to transpire within our bodies, within our lives, within the human existence, within the salvation of the planet itself. No one likes to be betrayed, but somehow, way or other, we've all been betrayed. Breathing into it again. You know, I look at the different things that my own father did, and he was a great man. He was a loving heart. I called him, like he was like the white Bill Cosby, because he was always so funny and silly and zany. Well, without all the negative stuff of Bill Cosby now, but anyway, yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah. Oh, Matakuyasan. So breathing into that part of it, there was also some places where I felt betrayed by my own father, and I had to own that. I had to own that in a big way. And I had to do a lot of inner healing, and a lot of us have had to do a lot of inner healing of the things that our parents betrayed us with, because we were light bodies as children. We always were. We got taught our pain. Our pain was infused into us. We weren't born with it. You may have past life experiences and all those wonderful things. Those veils open up to us wider and wider as we become more enlightened, so our whole soul journey can get more bigger pieces of the pie. But at the same time, we're born into this one with the memory of this lifetime on purpose, so we don't go completely berserk. So we just got to breathe into those moments of betrayal and say, what does this betrayal offer me? The betrayal of Jesus by Judas, as the story goes, offered the world salvation. Without that betrayal, the rest of the story wouldn't have happened. And the things, if you look at the perspective of Judas, what a gift. I'm an avid fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar. And if you see how Judas is betrayed there and the angst he went through, it moves me still, because he was such a loving man in himself, but he was stuck in fear. He was so afraid of what Jesus was doing, because Jesus was just popping the bubble on everything. And Judas was stuck in his dogma and was afraid that the whole of the people were going to suffer by what Jesus was doing. And he just didn't have enough faith in the moment to understand Jesus' bigger mission, the broader perspective of all of life. But what an elemental role he played in all of our lives. So as I look at some of the things in my own life, the parts of the Father and my Father that perhaps has betrayed me, I realize what a gift that was to me. Because in every betrayal in that moment, I may not have understood it, and I may still have stayed in the darkness with it. But as I looked, deeper and deeper is what it did for me. It sent me deeper and deeper within my own being, searching for more and more ways to feel better. Well, this was all part of the course. I believe and I know for myself that I raised my hand and said, yes, I want to come down to that family with that mom, that dad, those brothers and sisters that are going to be the greatest gift to me, not only in my earth life and the love that we share with each other. That's my sister over there. But for my spiritual life and all the wonderful, enlightening awakenings that have happened within me. Sometimes we see people where nothing ever bad has happened to them, and that's okay. That's wonderful. They can still lead a wonderful life of depth if they choose to. But sometimes it's the depth of our pain that has brought us into the most wonderful part of ourselves. Look at all the songs that we sing here. How many people, as writers, musicians, lyricists, poets of any sort, have brought their grief out and made music from it. So out of the darkness comes into the light, and this betrayal is such a necessary part of our growth that sometimes as we go into that, just this me being of it, and take all those outside forces and now go within and say, where have I betrayed myself? Who in me has betrayed the light in me because he was afraid to look at the dark? Maybe it was my logical mind. Maybe it was the part of me that believed in all the stories and had to just follow them verbatim instead of using my own intuit and understanding and receiving my higher wisdom, my high self, my spirit guides, whatever you like to call them. It's all part of you. It's that higher vibration within us that we are always all connected to in the first place. Maybe it's that part of me, as we talked about the right use of will last week, that has denied my own desires in this life because I've believed in too many people telling me that what I want is a sin. So I've denied my own will and shoved it down until they became my own betrayals. So they became the parts of me that wasn't willing to just step into the light. As we go into this season, and as we look at the story of Jesus and the Passion, there was a death that had to occur through this betrayal. And the death that we're talking about doesn't have to be a physical death. At some point in this time, we're all going to cross over and go back to the light in that form. But while we're in this physical form, we see all around us death and decay, and we know that from that becomes something else that's born. As I see one tree die, and all the things that decay around it, we see it fertilize the ground and then see new plumages grow from beyond it. We see more flowers, we see more brush. In the state of Florida itself, all the wildfires that we have, and people are like, ooh, fire. It's like, yeah, that's the natural state of Florida. That's how it does it. That's how its own ecosystem works. Without that death, all these other things couldn't be reborn. So as I look at these betrayals in my life, match it to the different stories, and again, we're most familiar with Jesus, but all of them went through this. They all went through this. All of them in their time dealt with the passion, the betrayal, the death, and then the resurrection. As we talk next week, we're going to be going a little bit more into the resurrection part of it, being Easter Sunday. And the title for that talk will be Phoenix Rising. But first we have to go into the death part of it. And sometimes we're just afraid to do that. And if you want to believe in the story of Jesus, if you want to honor the man, honor all the men before him, all the women before him that have brought these lessons to us, brought them in a good way, sacrificed their lives so that we can live. When we look about salvation and redemption and all these different things, what are they? What are these different deaths that we have to experience? Well, maybe it's the death of my denials. Maybe it's the death of my belief in separateness. Maybe it's the death of the illusion of being trapped in my own body instead of knowing that my spirit travels way beyond the physical, period. All these things, if we want to believe, as we're a new thought, that we are part of this creation, we're part of this reality, as we're creating this reality, these are essential parts of us. And as we are in the spring equinox, it's that time of new beginnings. It's that time of balance within ourselves. It's the time to look at the death side and the light side and all the things that I have felt betrayed in and just process them in a good way. Do it with your brothers or sisters. Do it by yourself. Do it in meditation. There's so many different ways that we can be with ourselves, but it has to be owned. It has to be known within us. If I want to awaken and I'm too stubborn to wake up and get out of bed, I can just lay there all day. Part of this has to take some of your own beings, our own fortitude, our own willingness to look into these shadow sides. And again, when we say shadow sides, we're not talking about bad. We're not talking about wrong. It's about dark and light and balance. And the whole idea of the spring equinox is to teach us about balance. There's no shame as the solar system descends into the darkness on that side of the year. None of the planets are going, I'm so ashamed of myself. I've descended into the darkness. It's just a place of understanding. It's our egos that get stuck in shame, pain, guilt, right, wrong, judging each other. Well, they should be ascending. How come you haven't ascended yet? Well, maybe I'm on my descension. Sometimes we have these power days to really help us, and that's what equinoxes are. They're power days. But you have a power day within yourself. It's like, oh man, okay, I missed it this spring. I'm going to have to wait till next spring. You don't have to. Have your own spring. Just be willing to go inside and own these things. Again, back to the meditation. At first, my little kid inside was like, you can't do that. You can't tell them to look at their betrayals. It's going to scare everybody. I'm like, no, it's not. And if it does, then ahomatakuyasan, so it is. Amen. That's part of their own being, enlightening themselves. They have to face their fears. Roosevelt said, what do we have but fear itself? Blah, 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 blah. Sometimes we get, what? It's fear, but fear itself. And we get so caught in that sometimes. They're afraid to take that very first step. It's like, it's not so dark as you may think. It's like there's always light there anyway. You're the light. You're there. Breathe into it. In different ceremonies throughout the land, we have shaman's death, Native American ceremonies, cultures, natives of all over the place have a ritual called a shaman's death, and they might term it something different in their culture, but it's that willingness to go inside and die on purpose. But you don't have to die. But you do have to die. And that's what Jesus and Osiris and Mithras and all these people were trying to tell us, that if we're willing, just willing to take a step into it and breathe into it and go, where am I dying inside? Because I'm unwilling to die. We just did a lodge at Scott and Becky's last night. And one of the most important parts of the lodge is death and rebirth. And when we go into the lodge, we're kind of saying goodbye to the world, so that when I come back out anew, I'm a brand new person. And we have to own that. Are we willing to let go of the things that we prayed to let go of in lodge or in any kind of ceremony that you choose to do? This is one of the biggest lessons that the spring equinox, this holy week as we're in, is here to teach us. This is the whole life of the Master that we call Jesus. And as we watch the Passion of the Christ, and not the movie, but the scene, and we watch the different stages and all the horrific things we heard about and were taught about when he had to carry the cross and bear his burdens and then finally be tortured and died. All of that is is what happens in us anyway. It's like we've even come up with the sayings, we all have our cross to bear. It's like, well, why? If we want to believe in what he did, he said, drop it. I'm doing it for you. I'm showing you how to redeem yourself. But we have to be willing to face that part of it. And it's scary sometimes. And what the spring equinox again and all these masters were trying to do in this moment was teach us balance, to teach us that we have the empowerment to do this. We have all of the gifts within us and the fortitude to bring this forward in our lives. And we always, always, always have a choice. But there's a funny thing that happens with enlightenment. The moment awareness happens, it's hard to go back to ignorance is bliss. The moment you have that notion, the moment you have that new idea, the moment you have that revelation or awareness, it's hard to turn your back on it. And I've used this as an example before, as the only mortal sin was to turn your back on God. That's turning your back on you. We are the gods. We are the goddesses. We are the Christ light that we're talking about. All these Osiris, Mithras, they were Christ too. It meant anointed one. Again, Jesus Christ wasn't his full name. It meant anointed one, and we are the Christs, or we are the Osirises, or the Mithras, or the Marks, and the Judys and the Suzannes and the Beckys and everyone in this room. It's about illuminating this and understanding it, but we first must be willing to step into that other part. We're going to talk more next week about the lighter side of this. And as I'm going in, being in Palm Sunday, it's like, gosh, he's talking about the darkness and stuff. It's like, yeah, if you want to. Or you can be just one of those sea creatures that gets churned up in the Milky Ocean because they just chose not to do anything. And that's what that story was talking about. I could have read on and on and on for all the different stories. So I grabbed bits and pieces of them to try to help us understand and explain that. We always have a choice. And when you look around in your world and in society and seeing that tug of war between good and evil in the world itself, we do our prayers for the countries every day and send our love out in a good way to some places that we know is experiencing nothing but darkness. And there's a whole bunch of souls in those countries that are light beings, that do want to emerge, that do want to come out, and they're being stuffed down. So we have to start right here at home. If I want to ripple something out to Sierra Leone, I got to start here. If I want the darkness to go away in Sierra Leone, I got to help the darkness go away in Mark so that I can shine my light with Becky and with Jean and Julie and everybody in my life, so that as we go out into the community, we're rippling light, and know that those ripples are going to make it there, and that maybe just one day in our own lifetime we're going to see a leader in one of these countries. Holy moly. Do you realize how impassioned I was about this? Wake up and open their eyes and see the light and start realizing that they've been treating their people wrong, that their women deserve to be honored and treated like the goddesses that they are, and that all the children and the babies in the world that are being sold and all this negative crap that we see happening can be healed once and for all. But we've got to start here. We've got to be able to have the passion within us to go through our burdens, to carry that cross, to be flogged by the society within us that's telling us we're not what we say we are, and to just breathe into it so that we can come back into the light. To just breathe into it and to own every single betrayal and look every single person in the eye, whether they're alive or dead, just look in your mind's eye and say, thank you for the greatest gift you've ever given me, the greatest gift that I've ever realized, that your betrayal brought me, that my death brought me, was to help me stand in the light. Ahom Takuyasin, thank you.
Top of the sky and the farthest point on the horizon. Do you know who you'll meet there? Great soldiers and seafarers, artists and dreamers who need to be close and I wanna walk the safe side of the street and lull myself to sleep and all my pain. Oh, but deep down inside I know I've got to learn from the greats and my right to be living. Let my wings of desire soar over the night. I need to let them say she must have been mad. I wanna get there. One who is touched by the sun. One who is touched by the sun. One who is touched by the sun. I've got to learn from the greats and my right to be living. With every breath that I take, every heartbeat, and I wanna get there. I'm gonna be one who is touched by the sun. 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 One who is touched by the sun.
Let's all